They are only judges. To judge is to pass a sentence on someone or to condemn. Judgment is the mental ability to perceive and distinguish relationships. It is discernment. Only those that have lived fully are able to let go in death, for they will have no serious regrets. For it's not regret per se, but a feeling of lack. For you will feel that you did not live fully, you did not live up to what you came to do on this earth. Even if you lived a successful and glorious life, if your life was not directed towards your particular calling, then you would have failed. A good life is proven by a man's willingness to die, for he must choose to die. Most of the time, it is not the mistakes that we made along the way, but the things that we did not do at all that we really regret. The things we knew we should have done, but didn't. We ignored a call. There is a feeling that the calling comes from outside of you, that it is someone or something else that calls to you, and not yourself. You rationalize your ignoring of your calling by leaning on self-will. In your judgment, you must remember that there is a piece of transcendent divinity within each and every individual. You must ask yourself if this divinity is within the person themselves or within their soul or spirit. In order to judge, you need an ideal to judge against. The mere fact that you are judging or differentiating presumes that you have an ideal in which what you are differentiating is being judged against. It is a sort of wrestling with an ideal, an aggression or opposition birthed by the accompanying antagonist that is born whenever something is differentiated. When different manifestations of offshoots of your ideal are brought together and integrated, laws arise. We usually assume that the laws come from the ideal itself, but that is not quite true. The laws are produced from bottom up, but the ideal is necessary in the integration of the offshoots of the ideal. We use these laws when we judge, but the laws facilitate the judgment. They themselves do not judge. They offer a frame of reference, a low resolution construction of the ideal, but they themselves are not the ideal. We like to believe that we own our own body, life, and being, but that is not what manifests in our day-to-day lives. People feel safe when they belong. When people are lost or alone, they have a yearning for a sense of belonging. For belonging implies ownership. It's very hard on people when they do not belong or are not owned, mainly because they have nothing to orient themselves towards. Everything is possible, and they can do whatever they want. If you owned yourself, you could just command your needs and wants away. But you can't. Your very desires imply an external ownership and responsibility. You are under a dominion. Within these needs that you have are things that you find valuable. Some more valuable than others. This means that your values are not your own either. They are a manifestation of the dominion that you inhabit, a dominion that owns you. These values are with you from birth. You are born with them, within your genes, and within the construction of the body in which you inhabit. You are not a blank slate. You are a creation of your dominion. Your dominion literally creates you. In our creation, we strive to become one with our dominion. Some people do this better than others. Those that are the best are exalted as physical living manifestations of the dominion. They are the dominant ones and have dominance over the particular dominion in which they are the best in. We are subjects of a higher being. You are not a master in your own house. There are certain actions or epiphanies that once you commit or experience, change you forever. There is no going back. For one of them would be getting red-pilled. Another would be getting saved. It is not exactly clear that you are the one that brings about these epiphanies to yourself. Even though you choose them, they also choose you. They are events that happen to you. In order for something to choose you, it must be an autonomous entity capable of judgment. The judge chooses you. It judges you against itself as an ideal, meaning that it must find you worthy of this gift of profound salvation and transformation. But it also means that you have the agency to make yourself worthy to be chosen. The process of making yourself worthy is your answering of the call. The judge always calls you towards itself and towards enlightenment. For Carl Jung did say that paradoxical views that are not conscious will be played out in your world as fate. If you run into a particular problem in the same circumstances all the time, then the problem may be you and not the problem that you happen to be facing. It is not exactly clear that there are any people that do not fall under a particular judge. A worldview or ideology that doesn't have a living, breathing judge is the materialistic worldview. This we call Marxism. For Marxism, taken to its utopian manifestation, brings about destruction, havoc, genocide, starvation, and death to all that inhabit that particular dominion. It is as close to a real-life manifestation of malevolence and evil as we have ever gotten. It is not that evil is its own entity. It is willful blindness, knowing that you are supposed to look and pay attention to something, but choosing to ignore it. It is your judge or ideal calling to you, and you refusing the call. Moving away from your ideal is akin to the manifestation of hell. Even if what you have chosen to move towards is not particularly bad, hell, Satan, or evil is relative to the particular domain that you inhabit. Evil cannot exist without the offspring differentiations of a particular ideal or dominion. We can't all have the same devils, even though they tend to be remarkably similar. You need problems throughout your entire life for you to feel like you are leading a particularly meaningful life. As far as you are not ideal, living in an ideal's dominion, will not satisfy you. You need problems. You need obstacles. You need your ideal to generate objects that will stand in the way of its subjects. The lower order ideals persecute you based on who you are, who you have been, and who your ancestors were. Higher order ideals say, come as you are. So when exactly do you believe? I think you believe in death. In death, there is no doubt. Death is true. In order to call yourself a believer, you must have died and resurrected within the domain of your ideal. Saying you are a believer is not a proclamation of your moral imperative or superiority. It's situating yourself in space and time. It is stating where and when you are. Switching your belief from one ideal to another literally changes your perception. The world doesn't look and feel the way it did before the switch. It is a new place. It is also a new time, for now you have been reborn. You no longer have a history that matters in this new domain. Your history begins anew. The truth does set you free, but it burns all that is false about you. For Friedrich Nietzsche did say that you can tell a lot about the character of a man by how much truth he can handle. In your pursuit for truth, you will lose a lot of yourself. In ultimate truth, you will die painfully and tragically. For it is not enough to just lose parts of yourself. You must lose all of yourself. No one learns everything all at once. So not only will you die, but you will die painfully and slowly. The upside is that you will be reborn. And growing up is a pain in and of itself. It is not easy to become more than what you are, especially if what you are is young, incompetent, ignorant, and naive. The dominion or ideal manifests itself as the judge in your head. It is the voice that speaks and calls out to you. You can choose to either listen to it or ignore it. For some people think that that voice is them. I do not think that is true. I think that it is the voice of their ideal speaking to them. Our thoughts do not belong to us, and neither do our dreams. Our judges call to us, and we are accountable to them. We are always being judged by them, and in death they shall pass their final judgment and enact their wrath and vengeance upon us for our misdeeds. From our judges and their dominion do we derive meaning. For all we do is for them, by them, to them, and because of them. We can either strive to provide sufficient sacrifices to our judges, or we could ignore, curse, and kill our ideals. We will be judged either way. There's a lot of incentive in killing your ideal. For if you did not have an ideal, then everything you do would be meaningless. This may sound vain to those that wish to live a righteous life, but to others, this lack of meaning fits their goals perfectly. They want the rationale. to do just what they want to do, when they want to do it, to live a life without sacrifice. A philosophy of meaninglessness is a source of liberation. It is selfish in all accounts, and most importantly, it allows sexual freedom. When you heed to your call and take your judge seriously, it will interfere with your sexual freedom. You will not be able to indulge in your passing lustful desires without judgment, guilt, and shame. A less talked about restriction that a judge imposes on its subjects is the restriction on who and when you can love. Who you give your attention, care, time, and work to will be restricted by your ideal. There will no longer be sexual and romantic freedom. Sin is to miss the mark, a mark made valuable by your judge. It is to build your identity outside of the scope provided to you by your ideal. Many believe that to sin is to do a horrible thing. It is to break a law or to harm someone else. But we know that sin is much more personal than that. For there are many things outside of the scope of the mark that are very valuable, wonderful things that help a lot of people, that save them from death, acts that inspire and motivate, acts that heal and give life. But as long as they are outside of the scope that your dominion has set for you, they will all be considered as sin. It is in willful ignorance that destruction finds life. When those that know that they should look refuse to look, when those that know that they should speak shut their mouths, when those that know that they should listen plug their ears. For our judge is forever, and what we may hold important now would not be if we lived for 500 years. What we would deem important if we lived for 500 years would seem inconsequential if we lived for 10,000 years. And what we would deem important if we lived for 10,000 years would not be if we lived forever. Sin, which is inconsequential in 80 years, will have grave consequences in 500 years. For you are not a being of your time. You are a being of your judge's time. You belong to your domain. When your ideal called you to order, you refused the call. When your sight failed you in school, and you could not remember all that you had studied, you refused the call. When you lost your job for no apparent reason, and your meal ticket was snatched from your hands, you refused the call. When you were betrayed by your spouse and found yourself divorced and with nothing, you refused the call. When you were ordered to break your relationship with your beloved friends and leave your lover, you refused the call. When you were urged to leave your mother, father, son, daughter, wife, husband, and family behind, you refused the call. When the divine beckoned to you to let him into your heart so that he may transform you, you refused the call. When you were told to take on more wives and beget more sons. You refused the call. When you did as you were told, but you dragged your feet and swore all the way to the mark. You refused the call. When you were asked to go into training, to take up the word and open yourself up to the influence so as to prepare for what is to come, you refused the call. John 12:48 says, He that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. You will be judged by the knowledge that you have, for now you have known and have continued and chosen to sin. Your willful ignorance will not be forgiven, for you know and you choose to do nothing. For one day you will look up, and there will be no one calling, no one watching, no one that cares to inspect, to see if what you are doing is wrong or correct. No one to impress, no one to disappoint, no one to show your accomplishments to, no one to discuss your failures with. No action will be better than another. Nothing that you do will have any meaning. You will have no limits. You will be nothing. There will be no difference but the words from your Father that you chose to ignore. For hell is to be forsaken by your Father. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.